it's a war. It's global. It's impacting
Yes.
everybody. So what do you call it? I think this is has got the potential to be the biggest, most engrossing conflagration the world has
Yes.
seen.
As amusing as it has been to read in the Daily Mail about expats worrying that they've left their Monjaro back at the flat,
Yeah, yeah,
that was a real piece.
yeah.
I think everyone being serious wants them home safe.
Create the environment for a national discussion around what Britain is and who
Yeah.
we are and where
It's a
we're
very
going.
good way of doing it. Time is his greatest enemy. And
Yeah.
also, he ain't the new thing anymore.
Yeah,
Like it or
exactly.
not, Zach Polanski and the Greens are the new kids in town. And
Yeah.
reform is kind of yesterday.
Hello and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, one and all.
Hope you're all having a great weekend so far. This is the Two Mats question and answer session brought to you by the wonderful subscribers of the New World magazine. Do join them, please. First question comes in from Tulip in Salford, and it's a very simple one. Are we on the verge of World War III? What do you think, Matt?
Well, we were saying on Thursday that quite a few people are asking this, so thank you, Tulip, for doing so. Well, obviously, it depends what you mean by World War III. If you mean, as I suppose, in most movies and thrillers, the nuclear apocalypse, then I don't think we're there yet. So everyone can relax a little bit, if not totally. But I think I think World War III has always, certainly since the end of the Cold War, has always been likely to take the form of a sort of multi-theater, incredibly dangerous, asymmetric conflict, which is fought by proxies as well as states. And on that basis, we are there, And I actually think that looking back, World War III began in August 2021 with the retreat from Kabul, because that led to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Putin in February 2022, which helped to encourage October the 7th, which led to the Gaza conflict and the huge regional upheaval that entailed, which has basically led to this. And this, I still struggle, as I did on Thursday, to define what this is, Matt.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think it's got, it's a war, it's global, it's impacting
Yes.
everybody. So what do you call it? Well, I remember that famous Albert Einstein quote. He said, I don't know with which weapons they'll fight World War III, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yes.
And
100%.
so on that basis, I don't know whether I pray to God that this does not qualify as World War III, that we don't end up obviously in nuclear fallout
Yes.
shelters. But nevertheless, this is the biggest in my lifetime. I think has got the potential to be the biggest, most engrossing conflagration the world has
Yes.
seen, hasn't it?
It has, and we now have. If you assume that there is a loose knit alliance between Iran, Russia, and China, we now have the Ukraine war against Russia,
Yeah,
and China clearly backing Iran, and weighing its options on this very clearly. I mean, it
yeah,
hasn't stormed in, so we're not there yet. But it is a proxy. I mean, amongst many other things, the Iranian war, as I suppose we must call it, is a proxy for America versus China, which is, of course,
yeah,
the big duality of this
yeah.
century.
Do you how much credence do you give to that in terms of that there's a clear strategic thought process there going on in the White House, which is like actually this is all about denuding China in the global stakes.
I think when you see Hegseth and Trump in
Yeah,
action,
yeah,
using the words clear strategic idea seems a little bit much.
yeah,
Rubio, I think, I have certain contempt for Rubio because he has sold his soul to Trump, but he's a hugely intelligent person. Actually, for him, I think, as a person of Cuban heritage, this is all really about. He's a cold warrior,
yeah,
Rubio.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I suppose for him, yes, this is a proxy war. I think Trump likes the idea of biffing China in the nose. At the same time, he's supposed to be seeing Xi, I think, at the end of this month.
yeah,
And presumably there'll be lots of hugs, and he'll say in the press conference how he has a wonderful relationship with him. I
yeah,
mean, that's part of the weirdness of this multipolar world is they all fight each other, but they all then meet. They're
Mm.
like mob bosses.
Yeah, yeah, it's very strange. All right, next question from is still related.
From friend of the pod, Driver Andy. Good to hear from you, mate. WTF is Mark Carney doing endorsing Trump's war before the dust from first bombs settled, along with Germany and Australia? MAGA don't need to divide and rule. We're doing it for them. What do you reckon about?
Well, I mean, I had exactly the same initial response. Like, well, that's surprising. I was surprised at how hot off the mark they were with their endorsement of the action. But then I thought, what real choice do they have? Once you maybe they could see the consequences rolling out quicker than Keir Starmer did, and they,
Yeah.
there's no upside for them politically to say, this is an outrage and we're taking no part in it. I think it probably does reflect a bigger macro view of global politics on their part to say,
Yeah.
no, look, Trump is a dickhead. Trump is a wild card. He's a total maverick. However, Iran is the cause of all of our problems right now.
Yes,
and
that's right.
and so he's dealing with it. It would be puerile and stupid not to give him our backing.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because exactly what you said, 100%. But you could see that Carney is a very impressive individual and hugely clever. But that statement, which was we're not going to do anything, but we support this,
Yeah,
slightly had the smartest boy in the class feel about it. It was like the essay on how to deal with Donald Trump. And it was interesting how Carney has since then, as this started to become very real and very violent and very difficult to predict, he started to squirm a bit. So on Tuesday, he said that it was all a reflection of the failure of the international order. And then on Wednesday, he told reporters that the strikes appeared to be inconsistent with international law. So he's hedging his bets as well, because I'm sure that Canadians, if I know them, will not be thinking what a wonderful war it is. And
yeah,
again, we
yeah.
come back to what we discussed on Thursday, which is the domestic consequences. I don't know if there's any. I mean, there was a wonderful quote from a journalist, the Atlantic, on Derek Thompson's podcast, which was this is probably the only war in history where the society being bombed is more in favor of it than the society doing it.
Yes.
And it is a very odd paradox, isn't it? It
Yeah,
really
that
is.
is. That's a brilliant point. Brilliant. All right. Okay. Next question comes from Rebecca. Do you believe, like Ed Davey, that expats in Dubai should pay their own way home now the dream is over?
Well, it was a good biff, wasn't it? I mean, I suppose I have to be sensible and say no, because tax exiles are still the responsibility of this country, even if we don't like them, and it is a time of mortal danger, and not an opportunity to score points. And also, as fond as I am of Ed Davey, I think that this would set a precedent for use in some really terrible situations. I don't want
Yeah.
it to become. I don't like conditionalities in moments like this. So,
Yeah.
in the same way as I want asylum seekers to have access to emergency health care, I don't. I get where he was coming from, and it's, to be fair to Ed Davey, it's one of the things he's got better and better at is getting into the headlines, and he has been a bit quiet recently. So fair
Yeah.
play to him on that. But
Yeah.
as a point of principle, as amusing as it has been to read in the Daily Mail about expats worrying that they've left their Monjaro back at the flat,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was a real piece.
Yeah.
I think everyone being serious wants them home safe and sound.
100%. And I'll tell you what I didn't like about it. And I found myself surprised that I was so put out by the way he went about it was the singling out of Isabel Oakeshott.
Yes, it was ugly, wasn't it?
It was
It was
ugly is the
ugly.
right word. And it was obviously all about just giving Richard Tice a kick up the arse, because
Yes.
obviously Isabel Oakeshott is Richard Tice's partner. I don't know if they're married or not, but anyway, certainly his partner. And to say, should she be
Yes.
left out there stranded? Just it felt really petty and ugly. It also gave her a load of oxygen. I mean, it was self-defeating as well.
It
I
was,
thought it
and
was bad.
it's a sign of the debasement of politics when I mean, Ed Davies is a really good guy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I've known him for years. He's a really, I mean, whatever mistakes he's made and so on, he's a really nice and excellent person.
yeah,
And to see it, you're right, to see him make that ad mulierum point, was really kind of, come on, Ed, I
yeah,
hate saying you're better than that, but I kind
yeah,
of did.
yeah. Next question, please.
From Chris Harrison in Congleton. Following the Gorton and Denton by-election, how long ago it seems, I watched the last leg on Channel 4, and Adam Hills pointed out that if you remove turncoat Tories, the Green Party now has more elected MPs than the self-styled opposition Reform. Should it now be the case that when an MP defects to another party, a by-election is automatically triggered as the voters obviously did not vote for their new party?
Do you know what? I agree with this completely, but it does raise quite profound consequences to what we think of as our democracy, because we don't elect parties, we elect individuals who represent their constituents in Parliament. And obviously, the great failing of that was over the Brexit vote, where many MPs did not represent the views of their constituents, but abided by an overall referendum result. And then so it became obvious at that point that really we are moving increasingly into a more sort of party-based presidential style politics. But I do think if an MP is elected as a Labour MP, for instance, and then decides I'm going to a party with a whole new set of manifesto promises and values, and if you accept the basis that we do now elect parties rather than individuals, then that should become a new by-election instantly.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that you're right that we elect individuals, not parties. But I think there's a sense in which that isn't true, which is that Parliament, as well as being a lawmaking body and a place where the executive is held to account, is an electoral college. The numbers in it choose who becomes prime minister. The person that can command the majority in the House of Commons is prime minister, Keir Starmer now. And so who you stand for, the party you stand with, has an impact on that. And 100%, I think, oddly enough, it's funny talk because it's also new, but actually Farage's gang aren't what they used to be, because back in 2014, Douglas Carswell, when he defected from the Tories to what was then UKIP, did have a by-election. And then Mark Reckless, neither of these are particularly lovely people, but when he did the same from Conservative to UKIP, he did have a by-election in Rochester and Stroud. So that Reform is getting worse. And I think to the question, if there are going to be, as there surely will be, more Tories defecting to Reform, it's a bit much for them not to have. I mean, why is Jenrick Shadow Chancellor or whatever, Treasury spokesperson for Reform?
Yeah.
I mean, he was standing for the Conservative leadership a few weeks ago. It's ridiculous.
That's right. And fundamentally, if he is saying that my party has changed so much that this new party is now more akin to the values I represent, he ought to let his constituents reach the same conclusion and put it to the test.
I mean, he has said in interviews, if you notice my election material from 2024, it was all about me and not the party. Well, that's a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, if you stand in a constituency for a seat in Parliament under a party banner, you are saying, I want that party to form the next government.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, have you noticed the polling numbers around Reform? That they are falling. It's very interesting that they've gone from, and there hasn't been a huge amount written about this, but they have dropped quite materially in the last few months since Farage started adopting all of these kind of wastrel Tories who have joined the club.
We've said it a million times. Time is his greatest enemy, and also he ain't the new thing anymore.
Yeah,
like it or not, Zach Polanski and the Greens are the new kids in town. And Reform is kind of yesterday. Yeah.
Well, okay. So that's fascinating how the electoral landscape is shifting as we speak. Okay. Next question comes from Sam Digby. And Sam writes, on your show from the by-election, I think you're unbelievably harsh on Starmer. But what would you guys do if you were in a position to be an advisor to Keir, or if you were holistically advising Labour on how to ensure a second term?
Well, I'm not sure I've holistically advised anyone in my life, but I'll give it a go. I mean, if I was a personal advisor to Keir Starmer, which is an extremely unlikely contingency, but I'm afraid I'd be saying prepare to resign in May because your legacy requires that you do so in a dignified and patriotic way that's good for the party.
Yeah,
That's my view. On Labour, it's more interesting. I guess that's where the word holistic comes in, which is they should be making preparations for that. Even if there isn't a disaster in the May elections, they have to work on the basis that, in all probability, there's going to be. And the most important thing, there are two things they need to do. The first is straightforward, which is get Andy Burnham back in the Commons by any means necessary. And the second is there needs to be more strategic thinking in Labour generally. I mean, the Labour milieu is extremely boring now, which is a sad thing because it has been in my sort of career. There have been moments when it's been thrilling and exciting and full of pulsing with ideas. You didn't necessarily agree with them all, but there was a wave of energy there. And I'd like to see, things like Louise Casey's report on social care. I think whoever's the next leader and prime minister should accelerate that from 2028 to tomorrow. I do think still they should be imposing a wealth tax. I think they should be talking about integration rather than immigration. I think that they need to be radically future facing. And if Starmer does fall, they need to seize that opportunity to really relaunch the party and the movement as a future facing entity.
Yeah. My counsel would be, and I don't know quite what structure this would take, but I would say create the environment for a national discussion around what Britain is and who we are and where we're going.
It's a very good way of doing it. It's a brilliant way of doing
it. Make that an open exercise where people feel involved and they at least have a sense of understanding about what Labour stands for. And that is going to require a change of leadership. I really do believe that because I don't think... For instance, Shabana Mahmood, obviously the headlines have been dominated so much by Iran, but this is not what I think most Labour voters would think of as the kind of language they want to see around immigration. It feels too much like the kind of language that was a hangover from the Tories. And I think people want to have a conversation and a discussion about who we are and where we're going. And
I think
it's not happening.
So true. I think that, what does it mean to be British?
Yeah.
In a generous sense, not sort of Narayan Farage sense.
Yeah.
Is the terrain for all progressives.
Yeah. And people
it's a great argument.
And Matt, people, just as we do all the time on the podcast, people will form their views as they go along. The polls will be. Everyone says, they're all sitting there reading these bloody polls where people are asked blunt questions and forced to, okay, I've got to have an opinion on this right now. And those opinions are being formed by the media they're consuming and their preconceptions and the prejudices that we all are born with, right?
And their digestion at that moment.
Exactly. Or whether it's pissing down with rain outside or the cat's just shit in the hallway. But if we can have a conversation where people are treated like adults and treated as members of this community that is this country, then opinions will change and we might get to a much better place. But no one wants to have the conversation because it's deemed too difficult. Why? Because the polls tell you it's too difficult. It's a nonsense circular impediment to us all growing up and having a real conversation about who we are and what we want to be in 10, 15, 20 years. It's got to happen.
It's very interesting you mentioned Shabana Mahmood because it did strike me as so interesting that last week she was, really basically continuing with the same agenda that was supposed to have been binned with the departure of Morgan McSweeney.
That's right.
Now, there are plenty of people who will argue that Labour has to be tough on immigration and asylum. I get that. But it seems to me that there's been no discussion about whether it's right to continue with that. You're right. There's a sort of absence of public debate on it, which is really dispiriting.
Yeah. Okay. Let's have our last question. and it's from Charlotte. I've never quite got Tracy Emin's appeal, so was quite interested to hear you both lauding her on the pod last week. In the spirit of cultural discernment, who would the Mats pick as their most overrated British artist? And who would they hang on their living room walls if money was no object?
Well, should we do overrated artist each and
Go
then
on.
do
Yeah, go
money
for
no
it.
object?
Yeah.
Well, some people are going to be very unhappy. I don't understand. I don't get that. I don't understand why Gilbert and George are so popular. Never have. I don't have anything against them personally, and I used to see them wandering around the East End, and they were brightened up my day really. But the art, it leaves me cold. That's all. That's really all I have to say on that.
So Gilbert, I love it that you mentioned Gilbert and George, because I used to go out for a kebab with a great mate of mine called Dominic, and we would go to this kebab shop in Dalston called Mangle, and Gilbert and George every single day went for their dinner at 7:30. They would turn up. I don't know whether it was Gilbert or George, but one of them arrived first, sat down in the same seat, which was and this was just Grotti's not right. It was a fantastic kebab shop, kebab restaurant, and they'd sit down and they wouldn't even look at the menu. They would order the same thing, have a glass of red wine, and this was absolutely religious behaviour. So you always knew you were going to be sitting next to Gilbert and George. But then the restaurant started playing tinned music from speakers.
Oh, amazing.
And that was it. And they never came back.
They couldn't go back.
That was it. It was all over. So my most overrated artist is Damien Hirst, who I have an increasing pathological hatred for. Because I think, maybe I'm sort of entering the realms of defamation here, but I don't think so. He started out as a fascinating artist, a really great conceptual artist. And now he churns out by the factory load this shit of dots and swirls and cherry trees with blossom. But the thing I hate him for is that he doesn't do any of it himself. No. He's got a factory of artists who do all of the work, and then, and by the way, there's nothing new about that. Artists from Leonardo onwards have had helpers and assistants who've helped them complete their work. But what Damien Hirst does is he films these Instagram videos of him walking along hundreds of these bloody cherry trees, and he's got his tin of pink paint and a brush, and he's dabbing a bit of blossom on here, a bit of blossom, as though he's got real creative input into any of this nonsense. He is an absolute phony. He's become the biggest fraud, and anybody who buys this shit that he churns out thinking that they've secured some amazing investment in art needs to give your head a wobble. It's a joke.
He thinks he's Warhol, doesn't he? And he's not.
Oh my God, he's so far from Warhol. It's incomparable. Right, so the rant over.
So
who do you like?
Money, no object. Well, because it's always fun to choose something a little bit odd. An artist called Paula Rigo, who I was lucky enough to meet once, and I have loved since I was in my teens. She's a Portuguese artist. She died in 2022, but she's lived for a lot of time here, so I guess she just about counts as British. If I don't know if that's important or not, but she painted in this kind of magical, enchanted way that also took stock of the awful authoritarian rule of Salazar in Portugal, and she did a lot of fairy tales and just a magical painter. There was a terrific retrospective of her at the Tate Britain in 21, which was just one of the best shows I've ever seen. So if I could have a few Rigos on my wall, I'd be a very happy man.
Amazing. My favourite artist is also to be found in Tate Britain. And in fact, I was there a couple of weeks ago and was astonished really to find myself alone in this room of extraordinary artworks, where if you go across the river to Tate Modern, you can't move for backpack carrying busloads of tourists and stuff like this. But in Tate Britain's empty. And it's fantastic. Anyway, the artist I love is Walter Sickert.
Good one.
Victorian. In fact, many people think that he might actually be Jack the Ripper, which only adds to the intrigue. But Sickert paints these wonderfully. He's a great colorist, Sickert, and atmospheric, high-colored, quite abstract coloring of quite sinister feel he gives to things. and he painted wonderful series of music halls in London and entertainers, and it's like a real snapshot of Victorian London, and it lives and breathes. And I walked past he used to have a studio off Highbury Fields, which is close to where I live, and you walk past, and I think, my God, Walter Sickett used to come here and teach people how to paint. So if I could have a painting, I would have. It's a particular one, actually. It's of dancers, male dancers in Brighton, off the pier, and the perspective is so brilliant. It's looking up at these dancers, and the trick was he painted from newspaper photographs. He was one of the first people that would take out a black and white photograph of a newspaper photo, and then make an illustration, a painting of it. He's a wonderful, wonderful talent.
That's so there we go. Choice. That's such a good choice.
Dear listeners, let us know who you love, your artists. Yes. I'd love to hear that. In fact, if you do the courtesy of emailing in with your favourite artists, we'll try and pick out. We'll mention your names next week when we meet. But I hope you've enjoyed this week's Q&A. We'll be back at latest on Thursday. If I was a betting man, I'd say
I have a funny feeling
we may be intruding on your airwaves even earlier,
even quicker.
But at latest on Thursday. It's always a joy to spend some time with you on the Sunday. Do subscribe to The New World, please. Get that dropping through your letterbox every Wednesday. It will enhance your week, I promise you. Go to thenewworld.co.uk/2Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. Send in your emails to 2Matts@tnepublishing.com. And thank you, as ever, to the third Matt Withers, for producing the show. And until Thursday at latest,
have a great week.
Have a great week.